Yo,
Hey man, how is it going?
it's going very well. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Oh cool, you're in the room. Um, so welcome. This is cool. I don't. I'm just gonna be streaming this without like basically any interaction with anyone but you. I'm just streaming it basically to record it. I hope that's cool.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And
Cool.
that's kind of what I assumed would happen. And then like either you just post it unedited or you do minor editing or time stamping, who knows.
Yeah,
But yeah,
yeah,
I expected that this would just be like, broadcast to the vacuum and then posted somewhere.
yeah. That's basically the idea. Cool. So I guess for this first session, I don't really have anything specific in mind other than the sort of list of things that you were interested in that you told me slash Vince. But I was gonna maybe let you give me an impression of what you were looking for to start, and we'll just
Yeah,
sort of
dope.
build off of that.
So I was wondering also how this would go. So like I have a couple of like basic ideas of how I would approach it, and then if any of them stick, awesome. Uh
Cool.
But yeah, so what I am looking for is basically the what if I had played tournaments for 3 years, right? Things that I would get
Right.
from the metagame, things that I would get from just iteration, things like non-in-game experience and skills that I can't train because the game isn't supported
Mhm.
officially and the community is like sequestered to the dark web, right?
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
so it's mostly just like things that would be common knowledge if you were playing. So like if you see like the in magic terms, like if I'm playing against a guy that I know plays the rock in legacy and I have an
Mhm.
opening hand, like my mulligan decision, right? Or if I see
Right.
someone play a certain color of mana, I have expectations of what that deck could be. And then as someone, if someone drafts a captain, what squaddies can I expect, right?
Mhm.
That sort of thing. And because what I'm trying to do is build the community and perpetuate it ad infinitum all in our own little bubble, like we might just be playing the wrong guild list, right? And the game still functions that way, but it was
Mhm.
clearly designed and played at a high level and balanced around that sort of gameplay, such that like the experience would be better for everyone involved if we're playing somewhat optimized lists.
Right, right.
Uh, so like I guess what I would want to do is like go through what my take is on each captain from what I've been able to glean. So I've played like 20-ish games now,
Oh,
and by
cool.
games I mean like I finished probably 10 of them and the other 10 were like turn 1 slash turn 2 and I was teaching someone.
Right,
Uh
right.
so a lot of them were, I think like 3 or 4 of them were just the kickoff squads.
Mhm. Mhm.
And then I've played a couple games as the Order, and I think I gravitate towards them as a guild, even though I'm a little sad that I kind of don't want to play a 3-0 guild or an 0-6 guild. I think I want to
Mhm.
vince it up and do both things in Guild Ball.
Totally.
Uh, but I'm not sure yet. At least the Order, like post Fall of Light, is the only time I've ever played them, and the Harlem Globetrotters nonsense is very fun for me.
Totally. Yeah, it's really
Um,
cool.
and then I've played one match as I played my first Masons game with Honor because it seemed like a challenge.
Mhm.
So I played that the other night, and then I played who else did I played as a captain? Like one Navs game, one Shepherd's game. I played them into Navs, which was a terrible mistake. Uh, I
Yeah.
didn't actually think about because I've watched a lot of like the Vince's videos and stuff multiple times, and as soon
Mhm.
as I was halfway through that game, I remembered that he called that matchup the literal apocalypse, and I remembered why. Because it's like, oh yeah, no, you just always every single time get all of your dice as hits.
Yeah, yeah.
So the number of net hits was the number of dice rolled. But
Yeah.
beyond that, I think it's only things that I've been able to either read from old blog entries, glean from Strictly the Worst or YouTube, and then yeah,
Mhm.
uh, and like oh, I should have a spreadsheet open so I can write down core models or take notes or something.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Uh,
Yeah. Well, that all sounds awesome. If you've listened to Vince's content slash Strictly the Worst and stuff, you probably know. Well, you probably first of all got the impression that different regions and different people see the game differently, and that the
Mm.
Chicago folks are sort of known for like a particular style or a particular perspective of the game.
Yep. Yep.
Um, okay, cool. So you're aware of
Like
that. I
there's also that like the concept of a local or inbred meta is just like it translates across games, right?
totally,
Like
yeah.
it's but at some point if I get all of the information internally consistent from one meta, that
Mm,
actually probably functions just the same as if I had gotten it from the average of the world and maybe even better, right? Like if it turns
totally.
out that I'm getting Pat's take on Brewers and your take on Butchers and Vince's take on Alchemists, like if I then play the Alchemists and I give my friend Pat's Brewers list, that's probably going to be better than if we just randomed it or took what the last tournament winning list was.
Totally. I think that's totally right. And I was gonna say I think so. I think as long as you're aware of that perspective, I think that I still can be helpful even about the types of guilds that I don't usually play or the types of like play styles that I haven't always rated as particularly highly because I at least have the advantage of having played against a lot of different type of players by now.
Exactly. Right.
So
And
so yeah.
also like as a control player or as a highly skilled player of some deck, like when you have to realize that you're not the beatdown, so to speak, like you're the
Mhm.
one who's trying to slow the game down, or like you have to be aware of their threats, and so what you're doing is playing around their best move in your from
Right.
your perspective, right? So even if you wouldn't optimally play that guild, you at least know from your guild's perspective what they ought to have been doing, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's still
Definitely.
super valuable to me. And again, we're coming from the fact that like this is not for money, this is not for status, this is just I want to play the game in like at the way that it's going to be the most fun and the most balanced for the group of guys that has no experience, and I'm just trying to be the guy that imparts as much knowledge to that group as I can, translated from the people who have the knowledge.
Word. Word. Okay. Cool. Well, this sounds awesome. Yeah, well, I'd be happy. I'm totally down to just like go through guilds or maybe particular guilds that you're particularly interested in, talk about like how they tend to build rosters or game plans, or we could, or I could try to generalize a little bit more about how the game is played. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. Is there somewhere
If any of
particular?
that comes up, so like I guess what I'd like to do is if start with something specific and actionable and something I can like take notes on. And if it turns out that like something grabs our fancy or it's like, oh wow, I actually don't know what I'm talking about here, like can we expand upon that? And then we talk like wax philosophic about some aspect of the game that makes sense to me.
Mhm. Okay, cool.
But like if I'm looking at I guess we're start with Alchemist because it's what's in the roster right now. We've
Sure.
got Smoke, Soma Numa, and where's good old Midas?
Should be near the
Midas.
top. Yeah, there you go.
So my take on this guild is that alchemists these days, and this is not true over the course of the history of the game, but these days I
Mhm.
think that the alchemists are primarily a football guild. I think they try to be 3-0, and depending on what captain you take, they can maybe transition into like 2-2. But I don't think they can go lower than that on the number of goals they score. I think Midas is the ruthlessly goal focused one that plays like a Corbelli style game where he is a very effective solo piece that's kind of a showboat, and then he also can make big plays with his legendary and offers a lot of mobility to the rest of the team.
Mhm.
I think that Smoke is mobility and area denial, but I think still plays either a conditions-based knockout game or a football game, and then relies on a couple of conditions to get the rest of the points they need for knockouts. And
Mhm.
I think that Soma is the hybrid of those styles, where uh, plays like a coach when they're in Soma form, and when they're in Numa form, they just like bring the pain and knock out some model, one or two,
Mhm.
but primarily wants to be uh, activating Nitro or the other play
Mhm.
that they have, which I cannot remember. Uh,
Oh,
Raging Fire.
yeah, there you
Yeah.
go.
But like most of the time, the goal is to use Nitro to make a bunch of repositions happen because it's kind of like the Nav's legendary play every turn almost.
Mhm.
Um, and that enables either a scrum in your favor, which is fine, or extending goal threat or getting out of dodge, which I think is the primary goal.
Yeah.
The only players that I know are must plays, or I think are must plays, are Vitriol, one of the catalysts, and then others that I think were good but aren't good anymore. Compound and Crucible. I think Kami is a wild card but very good striker, and I have heard people play Mercury, but I don't know what list he would go in.
Cool. Okay, so I think in broad strokes, I agree with pretty much all of that. I think um, well, here to me, I actually think they tend to lean a little bit closer to 2-2 than I think your characterization. I don't think
Okay.
I don't think that 3-0 is like always optimal for any of their captains, and I sort of think that the way I've seen them played most effectively in sort of, I guess, the contemporary era of like maybe the last like 2 years or so, year and a half, something like that, is it's really focused around it, it's really focused around their squaddies, and it's particularly focused around I think Kami and Veteran Catalyst, and you can also play Catalyst one I think, especially with Soma, but so to me Vet Catalyst is kind of like a really he's a really big question, right? And the way like Midas and really I think of the way all of their captains play in terms of their like win condition being 3-0 or 2-2 or even 4-1 in some circumstances is less determined by the captain that you've picked and more determined by how your opponent tends to deal with Catalyst. Um, because there's like I mean reading Catalyst's card is it's pretty straightforward to understand after you've read all the rules on his card that
Yeah,
he's very
you put
vulnerable.
him near a thing, and then the place where you want to put him is where there's a bunch of people that he can kill one model and splash damage a bunch of the rest of them. And ideally, then either get out of dodge before he dies, or does he still have the thing where he kills himself for points?
No, he doesn't have that anymore.
Okay.
He basically is just a snowball piece, and he's but your characterization is exactly right. He's a I mean he's basically a missile, and you try to shoot the missile at a time when the missile is going to land, and that's pretty much it. And if you he can kill one model like nobody's business. If he gets a chance to splash onto multiple models, the game's probably over. Like if he could just take 3 attacks, maybe like at the bottom of one turn and then the top of the next turn, so 6 total attacks hitting 2 models. Those are first of all, those 2 models are definitely dead, and second of all, there might not be much recourse for your opponent. So a lot of times when alchemists are on the field, there's basically both players are playing around this question of catalyst of
Hmm.
and I think that Soma actually sort of asks a similar question with his or their Numa form. Like Numa is sort of like a similar thing, where if Numa gets set up in a perfect circumstance where they get to make all their attacks, the stuff is just going to explode, and probably in a way that's hard to respond to. Um, so, uh, so like looking at Midas,
So that
sorry, go ahead.
backing up the Soma card. So like, is it because Soma can so reliably get the Momentous 3, or is it like, or is it what's happening? Backdraft? Is it just eating the backdraft for more damage? Like it looks like the book is not super damagey. It
Yeah,
looks
so
like
there's 2 things about Numa that are key. One is that they always have Inferno on, so all of their damage numbers are effectively one more, plus also one
oh
damage
sure.
splash to
Yeah.
somebody nearby. And it also, Inferno is unique in Guild Ball in that it applies. It's an additional damage, but it's not like tooled up because it's an additional damage even on an attack that does
Against
not deal damage. So it's so
oh.
his
Oh, I did not
knockdown,
read that.
yeah, his knockdown is actually a knockdown 1 damage fire, and
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
his tackle is actually a tackle 1 damage fire. But anyway, which he can then eat
For two tack.
for 2 tack. So effectively, at least after his furious charge, he'll be 8 tack for the rest of his attacks, and often he'll have a totally plausible opportunity to make the charge have the +2 tack as well. It's just sort of based on the board state. But
Right.
the thing about Numa that is really frustrating to play against for me, at least, because I tend to play guilds that respond to bad things by killing them, is that not only does he do a lot of damage and extremely consistently, and it's that you're punished very hard for killing him. Like the explosion, the 6-inch pulse that's called Waning Light on the back of his
Yeah.
card.
Yep.
It's 3 damage and fire in a 6-inch pulse when you kill him, and it's only 2 enemies. It doesn't hit his allies either. So he has like there's no positional requirement to play that well, really. Um, you really do have to kill Numa once he's on the field if he has any way to get to your models. It's just you have to either figure out a way to like lock him down hard, which certainly some guilds can do, but also certainly not all of them. Um, or you have to kill him, and killing him hurts like hell. So Numa and Catalyst sort of get there in different ways, but they both, if they're set up properly and get to hit stuff, they're just gonna do a sort of comical amount of damage, often to multiple models, if that makes
So
sense.
does that mean that if you play Soma Numa that you've sort of freed up the Catalyst slot, or do you still play VCAT?
Yeah, I think that it's more plausible with Soma and Numa to play either O Catalyst or no Catalyst than it is with Smoke and Midas. There might be people that disagree with this, but if I was playing Alchemists, I would never take Smoke or Midas without Veteran Catalyst, personally. But
Right.
Soma and Numa is more flexible, I think.
Right.
Um,
So uh, it sounds like at least a way to think about playing them. And again, like I kind of want to make sure that you don't feel like you have to couch these statements, right? Like I get that
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
getting exclusively your opinion on this, and
Sure.
that like for any guild that you didn't just play to number rank one or whatever, right? Like
Mm,
obviously someone could have a different opinion, but
yeah.
like I'm mostly just looking for something where as long as I have an opinion and I can understand why I'm playing this strategy, that works for me.
Word.
So like the Midas and Smoke playing VCAT seemed to be something that you had to do pre-nerf. Like you absolutely had to do it. And
Mm,
according to at least Vince's take on the errata, like they nerfed Soma and Catalyst, but Catalyst not enough to make it not a must take.
yeah.
So like Burst of Fumes is still doing one, but
Mm,
like his playbook didn't get worse,
right.
right?
Right.
So like at some point he just still has you can just stack him with three and he will brutalize something.
Mm, yeah, and so maybe I think this. Uh, Thinking about just Midas for a second, because I think Midas still ends up being the most commonly played captain. I think he's probably the most flexible into different matchups. I think that this brings up kind of a broad point about playing goal focused guild ball. Is there are occasionally in guild ball guilds that are so good at going 3-0 that they can play the game where that's basically their only threat. There's definitely been versions of Shark that have been that
It's like
good.
yeah, it's like Fish Order Engineers, right? Like
Mm,
these are the guilds where that is plan A and B.
right, yeah, but I think that sort of game state usually doesn't last very long, either because of errata in the past or because people tend to adapt to it. Um, but for but what tends to be much more durable over the course of a lot of tournaments or a lot of playtime or even a lot of patches is guilds that end up going 3-0, but that isn't always their main plan, and it's more about how the opponent responds to other threats that they're presenting. And so to
Right.
me,
Like if you have to play super passively because I'm beating down
yeah,
and all of a sudden you're not threatening key parts of the board and I can just take the ball and have a goal run safely, like I might win via three goals, but that's not the story of the game. The
yeah,
story of the game is I was presenting such a credible fighting threat that I found goals along the way.
yeah, exactly. And so to me, Midas with Veteran Catalyst is a very clear example of that because I think Midas wins probably roughly equally between 3-0 and 2-2 games, and maybe occasionally even goes 4-1. But the actual story of the game is pretty much always the same. It's that the opponent is trying to balance keeping the ball from Midas and one or two other strikers like Kami or Vitriol or something like that, while also either killing or staying away from Veteran Catalyst. That's like my experience playing against Midas, probably uninterrupted for like 3 years now, even though both of those models have changed several times.
Hmm.
And I think that again, if you've listened to Vince's content, you know that there was a time when Smoke played a pretty radically different game that was much
Yeah,
more
so
about takeouts and denial.
I
But
feel like so I've listened to it and I've tried to sort of piece together how this must have worked, but
mm,
like my take on it is if you decided to play as hardcore non-interactively as you possibly could and just always stayed out of their threat range but created zones and forced people to go into the zones that eventually you would just literally bleed them out or literally burn them down or poison them out,
mm,
and like the idea was because they can't get to me because they're either on fire or dying or I'm in cover or whatever, my models are untouchable and you slowly die.
Yeah. So yeah, that definitely was a plan, and I think you could still try to do that with smoke, but in my opinion, that's like a very inconsistent way to play right now. I think that the game in general has gotten faster in terms of like how far models go in a single activation, which hurts smoke, and also, you mentioned you asked about whether Vet Catalyst still had the thing that killed himself. That was a really key part of playing Smoke that way, and that's no longer on the card. Um,
Right.
so to me, Smoke is still a legitimate choice, but she's playing a very similar game to Midas, and the way I would determine whether I wanted to play Midas or Smoke would be more about particular matchup ideas. Whether like Smoke being able to move via teleports turns off really scary mechanics like countercharge or something like that that Midas has a lot of
Right.
trouble dealing with or something.
Because you can just place into a monkey aura or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. So to me, those two captains, even though their cards look very different, end up playing pretty similarly, and it's more about like tech rather than like a broad strategy difference.
Okay.
Hmm.
Okay. So it sounds like uh I have a much better idea of like their game plan, like
Hmm.
what how the guild wants to win and how they would approach the game.
Yeah.
So like I'm playing one of the captains, a
Hmm.
catalyst, uh a striker in Kami and or Vitriol,
Yeah.
and then uh probably someone to start the condition fights like Mercury or Crucible.
Yeah, I think Mercury, Crucible, or original Calculus. So these guys could all reasonably take those like last 1 to 2 slots, depending on whether you take both Kami and Vitriol.
Okay.
And to me, Crucible is like another striking threat that applies damage, and she's kind of you'll see as you I don't know, as you're thinking about playing striking teams, you'll notice that pretty much every goal scoring team worth anything has at least one option of someone who takes the ball in a way that's not a tackle. And Crucible's
Yeah,
sort of
like
your
ball's
option here.
gone or
Right.
whatever, right? Yeah.
And so the value of taking the ball in the way that's not a tackle is often it either gets
Breaks
around
close control.
yeah, it gets around close
Okay.
control or gets around the strategy of putting the ball on the ground and standing in front of it rather than holding it, or maybe it does both, depending on the thing. But so that's the value of Crucible, and also I think her covalence aura, the +1 MP to clear burning or poison thing that she has on the back of her card. I think
Right.
that's really good against other scoring teams because other scoring teams tend to have lower momentum in general,
Right.
and it's not as Crucible's not as great against fighting teams because they tend to have more momentum, and she's also very easy to kill.
Right.
4-0 with 14 boxes is not much. So
But she kind of makes up for that by being 2-inch melee and
yeah,
having acrobatic, right? So she kind of
yeah,
gets herself out of trouble.
yeah,
But
yeah. She's
so
definitely not.
but
Yeah,
you mostly want to play her into situations where she's not going to have to fight, right?
yeah.
Like, okay.
Yeah, and I think yeah, the key thing, the most common reason you take her is because she has a very long threat to the ball that is sort of not interactive with the Great Balls of Fire effect.
Great balls of fire, right? Because you have acrobatic, sprint, great balls, right?
Hmm.
And like, okay,
And
it's
she's
only interactive in that like I have to roll for great balls.
right. Yeah, sorry, when I say uninteractive, usually what I
Like
mean is
you can't do anything about
yeah,
it. You
there's no
can't shoot.
response
Right.
to it and yeah. Right. So you can't counterattack, you can't defensive stance and
Right.
like yeah, giving that model close control or something like that doesn't do anything.
Doesn't
Um,
doesn't work.
yeah. So then the other option, if you're not taking Crucible, or sometimes you take one of these guys with Crucible, is Mercury or Calculus. Mercury and Calculus, I mean, in sort of a broad sense, range damage is just kind of nice. It's a way you can interact with the opponent without them interacting back. It's a way you can do something relatively safely in the early stages of the game. Like this, one of these characters can just take 2 influence and throw a fire AOE and call it a day on turn one, and sometimes that's a lot.
Right.
Um, Calculus is pretty straightforward about why you would take her. You take her because of blind. Blind is still a really powerful debuff, and if you either have the momentum to bonus time it, or you're playing against a guild with really low defense, like Masons, for example, or blacksmiths, then you can expect to hit a blind every turn, and that can be really punishing to some teams. Like plenty of teams tend to put a bunch of buffs on one model and then have that model go win the game. And
The
blind,
vet decimate strategy.
yeah, exactly. And blind is a huge pain in the ass for a model like Vet Decimate. So both Calculus and Mercury are going to be support. Mercury's a little bit tougher to kill because the burning aura is kind of a pain, and while he does it, his control isn't as punishing as blind. The fire AOE does sort of have its own sort of special quirks. You can put it in front of a model rather than on
Yeah,
top of
I'm
them.
using it as rough ground effectively, right?
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
yeah. Basically, instead of blind, which I have, so against a high defense, low armor guild, right? Like,
Hmm.
blind is pretty bad unless I'm going to be bonus timing it a bunch, which is
Right,
not
exactly.
reliable. So instead, I play Mercury, which is like kind of a shitty blind, but it's a blind that's way more reliable because even if you don't line it up such that like, oh, you're on fire, like you're going to spend the 2 inches of movement going around it.
Yeah, exactly. And then the other reason you might take Mercury is because you're playing Soma slash Numa, because they have a specific synergy with fire. And I don't have a ton of Soma Numa games under my belt, like full stop. But I would, if if you found
It's
yourself,
fire matters, right?
yeah,
Like Numa wants to eat fire. Mercury makes really a lot of fire, right? Like
right,
this. It's also Mercury seems good against heavy reach because
mm,
like if you're gonna want to if you get within two, he still burns you.
yep, yeah, I think that's really useful. And yeah, and the Mercury would be the type of thing where I would probably, if I was trying to play this guild a bunch, I would probably play a couple games of Soma Numa without Mercury and see if I felt like I was like starved for fire all
Oh
the
man, I
time.
wish I had
And
more fire, right? Yeah.
yeah, and then if I did, I would start playing Mercury more.
It's like playing more land in the Magic deck.
Yeah,
Got it.
exactly.
All right, so yeah, this is way more in depth than I expected because like going model by model
Yeah,
makes
yeah.
it like
Sorry.
I can make no. This is incredible. This is super valuable to me because
Okay.
honestly, like if I could like you remember the Hot Wings episode where
I
we
do
went
remember
model
that.
by
Yeah.
model on yeah, well, hard to forget, right?
Yeah.
You guys broke down the Falconers Guild, but it was in a way that was incredibly valuable to someone just entering the game because it didn't come with a bunch of assumed knowledge. Because like I applaud the way that you guys made content, which is we're not going to read these cards and we're not going to talk about them in a vacuum like you've never heard of this model. We're going to talk about the advanced applications of this
Hmm.
in high level play because no one needs to know the basics. Everyone who's listening to this knows what this
Right.
model is used for, right? Except I don't.
Yeah,
so,
yeah. It's a
so like
different time
this
for
this
sure.
type of breakdown where it's like this is kind of the Falconers review of the guild, and so
Mm.
now I can even if like now that I know like effectively play Vet Catalyst, right? That's kind
Mm.
of the no brainer unless you have a specific build in mind where you don't want to play Vet Catalyst, and
Right.
then here are the other models available to you, and now I don't feel like I'm kind of just randomly picking, right?
Yeah.
Where it's like I don't know what the rest of the lineup wants, but now I do.
Hmm.
So that kind of take, like, this is fantastic. I kind of want to skip blacksmiths because I have absolutely no idea how they play.
Yeah.
Like, it's really hard for me to come into
They're a very
like
strange guild.
the new errata, especially because I think they changed a lot, right? Like,
Hmm. Yeah.
I think they what they were pitched as and what they were billed as and what they were for most of their lives was this like kind of below par guild that had a bunch of models that their I think their design space was like we are a little bit better at everything as like we're like better union except we don't have a strategy, and
Mm.
then they kind of got a strategy and now they're just I think above curve on everything, but I'm not sure. um
Yeah, I think that's
so
probably true. Yeah, they are a really strange guild to talk about because they have such specific dynamics between models. But
right, like no mascot. Like also
yeah.
when you take like a power model like Vet Cinder, which doesn't have the backward compatibility with like there's
Hmm.
not a master she's looking for, right?
Yeah.
So like you break those pairings and like when is it correct to break the pairings and what do the pairings do and like yeah, I have no experience with or against blacksmiths and I would like to at some point, but
Hmm.
jumping to brewers, I think I
Sure.
know more about what's going on here.
Hmm.
Uh, so I think their design space is knockdowns matter, momentous results across the board. Everyone has a heroic play, and of all the ways to play, they're mostly looking to beat people up. They can score. They're not incompetent at it, but that's not plan A.
Hmm.
Football Legend plus Friday are the main scoring threats, outside of the fact that Scum has a ridiculous threat range if absolutely necessary because of Get Over Here.
Hmm.
But mostly they're trying to either create one giant scrum with a shitload of pushing and momentum,
Mm.
uh, or create one Superman model and send them in with a bunch of buff stacking. So you do like times called, tooled up, Iron Fist, or whatever, and
Yeah.
then set that decimate off on a killing spree.
Yeah, I think that's a good characterization. I think one of the things that it might not be entirely obvious to someone who doesn't play this guild a lot, or in my case, play against the guild a lot, is they have a really specific playbook setup. And you said momentum across the board, but that's not quite the whole story. And I'm being picky about this because I think it actually dramatically
Also,
impacts how they
I
play.
love being picky about game design. Like
Okay.
coming from a TCG design background, like when I worked at Wizards, I had a role that was called the Council of Colors Leader of White, and my whole goal was to be finicky about the color white. So like every white card had to be this is something white can do, and even if you just change the order of these words, it matters because
Hmm.
that's something white can do versus can't do. So please get as esoteric and nonsensical and into the minutia as you want.
Okay, so the way the Brewers have a very specific playbook setup. The way they work is you're right that they do have a lot of momentum, or at least access to a lot of momentum. But on the bottom half of their playbooks, they have momentum only on knockdowns and pushes, and on the top half of their playbooks, they get momentum on damage. This is very unlike pretty much every other fighting guild in the game, which will have all the other fighting guilds in the game will have someone, if not everyone, with momentous damage early on the playbook, and that's just not available on Brewers. And so what that means is, oh, and the other thing about Brewers is they have the short playbooks pretty much across the board. Their playbooks
Oh
are
yeah,
almost
yeah.
always one.
They have tack plus one, right?
Right,
So
and so
they can wrap on native tack.
right, and so what that means is that when Brewers are hitting average average unmodified attack results, which is like the first 2 to 3 columns of of a playbook, depending on math and stuff. Their attacks kind of suck for doing anything offensively. They have control. They have like sort of a soft control of like the knockdowns and the pushes and
And
so forth.
repositioning. Yep.
Right, but they don't. They're bad at doing damage and they don't get rewarded for doing damage. But it also means that if they are sort of overshooting, whether that's ganging up on one model so you have a bunch of plus dice, or you have a bunch of buffs from your captain, or you
Or
are
spiking.
yeah, or you just get lucky and spike, your your attacks hit like a nuke. And so there's a couple things that you said in there, which is like get a big scrum together and gang up on one model and kill them, or buff a bunch of models and buff a single model and go have them do stuff. And I think on its own that's accurate, but you could say that about pretty much every fighting guild. The thing about Brewers is they're very extreme about that. Without that, they're garbage, and with that, they outperform every other guild. So they're in some ways they're really binary. There's like sort of an inflection point on like say Tapper hitting a model. There's like a point below a sort of mathematical point below which Tapper doesn't do anything and looks like an idiot, and above which Tapper like confidently kills an incredibly tanky model without like
It
sweating about it.
seems like for Tapper, it's like, can I reliably hit the four?
Yeah, exactly. Or can I on my first swing, which I did not pay charge dice for, give myself commanding aura, and then on the remaining 5 swings, can I hit the four at least on 4 of them? If so, I will kill every model in the game. Like, does that make
Right.
sense? That's sort
Yeah.
of like,
Yeah.
so
No, that's huge. And the thing is, what they're getting for that, like, because they're so bad outside of that situation, that's what gives them the ability to have momentous knockdowns and pushes so early in the book.
right,
Like,
exactly.
and it also enables them to set that up, which there is counterplay to, right? Like I can move things around as the opponent. I can encourage. I can rest. I can do all these things to sort of get out of that. But like I've noticed that like they're they're kind of Mason like in their ability to have good results low, but
Hmm.
not repeatedly, right?
Yeah,
Like if I hit Tapper's one on a counterattack or on the first attack, that's nuts. But if I continually hit it, like who cares? It doesn't
yeah,
do anything.
yeah.
So I didn't have the knowledge to understand that before.
Hmm.
So that's pretty eye opening. And a friend of mine, the guy that I play with most often, plays Brewers, and I've been trying to figure out like why he can't make them work. And I think that's it because neither of us knew what they were trying to do.
Yeah, and so I think that like good Brewers play often has like a kind of narrative across a single turn that repeats over the course of the game, and it's where the first half of the turn, um, Brewers models are tending to either kind of pathetically swat at their opponent to try to stave off some bleeding, or are just sort of idly buffing each other and not really interacting that much and kind of just sitting there stoically and tanking hits because they have tough hide. But
Hmm.
then if they're played well, the last like 1 to 2 activations of their 6 activations in a turn will
Are
just
just a
like
Mack truck.
yeah, we'll just like completely evaporate a model or get like 2 models down to 1 HP, and then the start of the next turn is Tapper kills each of those models with even dice because they're 1 HP, so it doesn't matter, and then puts up Commanding Aura and says, okay, you're fucked. You can't come anywhere within 10 inches of the middle of the pitch now. So
Right. Take a turn off. Right.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Um, so that's how I see good Brewers play going, and in my a million games playing against Pat's Brewers, the sort of game for me is the opposite, is to like completely overwhelm or stifle him in the first half of the turn. So the second half of the turn is still damage control for him rather
Right.
than
It's
his
more,
models
and
getting
the
to
thing
live
is,
the
like,
dream.
they're never bad at damage control because they
Yeah.
have all of these knockdowns and mobility options, right? But like,
Mm.
if they never get to turn the corner and make it Brewer time, like if it never gets to be Miller time, you're happy as the opponent, right?
Yeah,
That makes
at
a
some
ton of
point
sense.
it's at some point they're just losing very slowly. So which is
Right.
what you want as their opponent.
Okay. So, my take on the model lineup,
Mm-hmm.
I think like it's kind of a choice between Corker and Tapper. Like I think Esther's, if you go all in on Decimate, has buffs, but
Mm-hmm.
like Tapper seems to be just brutal as an individual model. Like I think he's
Mm-hmm.
just a murderer. And Corker seems to play the knockdown game better, and also like I don't think you can jail him the same way that you can jail many
It's
other
really
models.
hard to, yeah.
And I also think that like you get uh you get just a ton of free influence off of him. Like I think free bar is super strong.
Mm.
At least it reads super strong to me. I've never seen it go off, but like holy shit, it just reads nuts.
Yeah, I basically agree with you. I don't rate Esther's too much nowadays. I think there was a time when she was good, but I think she's pretty hard to play now. But yes, Corker's really good. I think Freebar is really good, and Freebar is sort of like the thing I was just describing about the narrative of a single turn for a Brewers player. Freebar is like an expansion of that over multiple turns in an even more
Right.
extreme way. Is you
Because
spend
I'm
like
sort of I'm spending a bunch of time building it up, and then the time that it's go time now, I actually get to overstack someone with +3 influence.
yeah, or even I mean, yeah, if you don't sufficiently pressure Corker's team in the first 2 turns, then the third turn he'll have like probably three squaddies with good attacks that can all make 6 actions in the same turn, which is sort of like game over, right? Because
Yeah, it's kind of unwinnable at that. Like you're
yeah,
time walking me, right? You're taking 2 turns to my one because I didn't take the time away from you early.
yeah, exactly. So the idea with playing against Corker is you kind of you want to make the game look bad enough for him that he's spending the beer tokens early rather than charging them up for some stupid showboating
Mega attack,
in turn three.
right?
Yeah. Um, but yeah,
And then
I would usually play Corker or Tapper for sure. And I would even if somebody told me they wanted to only play Corker, I don't think that's crazy. It's a little bit harder, but I didn't that would not blow my mind. So
I think that like Tapper is, I think, easier to approach as a
mhm,
novice player. I think Tapper also like
definitely,
tells you how to play him earlier, how to play him better. I think
totally.
that Corker, like, as soon as you can start think so, I believe that playing Guild Ball or learning Guild Ball is like learn the rules, learn how to spend an activation once you learn how to allocate properly, and then it's like okay, cool. Now look a couple activations in advance. And I think that Corker is like look a couple turns in advance. Like
Mhm.
Corker is like what am I doing turn to enable me to have a good turn next turn? Or do I understand that okay, from here on out the game's getting worse, so this is my go time and I need to turn the momentum, no pun intended, toward me, right? Like
Yeah, exactly.
I need this is the time when it's I'm losing control of the game.
Definitely. Yeah, that's
I
exactly right.
think that Friday is in most
Mhm. Oh, you cut out. You still there? Oh no.
yeah,
Oh, there
I
we
am
go.
still here if you can still hear me.
Now
Hello?
now I can hear you.
Okay,
Yeah, yeah.
back.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
We're
yeah.
good.
So when I went to send a message in Discord, it went gray. So I assumed I just fell off the internet for a second. So I think that Friday is in most, if not all, lineups because she is a striking threat that doesn't waste influence.
Yeah.
Like she's slippery. She can make Scum's threat range pretty insane. She has high defense if you're playing her adjacent to Spigot, who I think you often play. And
Mhm.
I think that she can channel her influence if you don't use it to do something with the ball to dirty knife someone, which isn't trash.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's exactly right. And I think Friday, yeah, in a fighting team like this, like Friday is sort of the perfect striker if you never want to go for 2 goals. Like she will practically automatically get 1 goal from very far away if you hand her the ball, and she's kind of a pain in the ass to get the ball from because she can often have very high defense. And that's if you're playing a fighting team that wants to go 4-1, that's literally all you want. You want some reason that the opponent has to care about the ball, but you don't want to pay anything for that, right? So
right. And I think that she's close enough to being a fighting model that you're not paying that much.
yeah, exactly.
Uh, I think that Hooper is an all-star. Like I think
Yeah.
Hooper is a must-play.
Hmm.
I think Lucky is super situational, and you play him when you need to get rid of conditions. I think Mash is bad. I can't really see a reason to play him, but I'm not sure. I think Pint Pot is you play him and not Corker for the
Yeah.
same reasons that you would play Corker. Like you want someone who can just like randomly turn on in the end step of a turn and destroy somebody.
Hmm.
I think Spigot is close to Hooper in must play status, but not necessarily that big. I think V Spigot is like fine, except that he has the same name as Spigot, so you never play him.
Yeah.
I think Stave is absurd, but I think it's because I suck. Like I think Stave is really good because I'm bad at threat ranges and understanding how to play against him, but like he seems bonkers. Like the reliability with which he can make that character play happen and get knockdowns is nuts.
No, I
And I
actually
think
I actually agree with you, and this is something that if we had, I guess, the whole strictly the worst group here, there would be a lot of
the
disagreement.
Stave Wars.
Yeah, yeah. All right, we'll get 2 staves.
Right.
But if Pat was listening in on this call, we would probably disagree about this because he does not rate the stave super highly, and he plays Brewers, but I play against Brewers, and I hate stave. So I think stave is infuriating to play against, and he to me, the fact that he's ranged in a guild that used to do more range stuff but doesn't really anymore, actually matters a lot because I think that
Right.
you can
Other than like dirty knives, what are you doing from more than an inch away, right?
right,
Like,
and I think that Lob Barrel is really nice because when in the turns or parts of turns that you're delaying the game because you're trying to get set up or trying to take an advantageous initiation or whatever it is that brewers are trying to do when they're not playing the game, um, stave is like a reason to not get too close to brewers, which I think is good. I think that's like he sort of passively helps the
yeah,
brewers
he's just
set
a
up.
picket fence, right? Like,
Yeah,
it's like, hey, you could come in here, but I'll just barrel you. So instead,
right,
I get to do corker shenanigans or whatever nonsense I'm trying to do, right?
right, exactly. So I really like stave. I think he's good.
And I think Stoker is trash. Like, I have no idea why anyone would play this guy.
Yeah, I
Like,
don't really get him either.
I feel like he's like, look at our color pie. Like, the Brewers get fire, but in order to get fire, we just don't give him anything else to do, right?
Hmm.
Like,
Yeah,
I think the best rule on his card is Magical Brew, and like, who cares? Like, I
yeah,
don't understand what he's doing.
yeah.
Uh,
The only thing I would contradict you with is the Lucky and Mash thing. I don't think Lucky is worth playing at all. I think that the guild has enough ways to um, excuse me, to deal with conditions on their own between Hooper's heroic clearing his own conditions and Corker having sort of a weird interaction with knockdowns, and you could even play Esters if you wanted to deal with conditions more often.
right.
And I would literally have Mash in my tournament 12, though I would not play him very often. I think there's just if you end up finding that your opponent is drafting the most extreme 3-0 version of their guild that you can imagine, then I would consider replacing Friday with Mash or someone else with Mash because sometimes him standing in a corner of the pitch with the ball is the hardest thing that Brewers can present for getting the ball because of
Sure.
resilience. So
So his job is exclusively kill the ball slightly harder.
yeah, it's like he has. I mean, other than an influence to hit somebody that got a little bit too close to him and try to house at them off the pitch, he'd probably never get influence. But he's literally just like a road bump to score a
Right.
new goal.
And I actually didn't consider that. So like if you give him the ball and you put him in the hidey hole, they have to come after him. He's a reach model and he has a tackle dodge that's applicable on the counterattack.
Tackle
So like
push, but yeah,
oh, okay. Well, still fine.
yeah,
Right?
it is.
Like it's tackle and an inch of move.
Yep.
Uh so
And
that makes
if
sense to me.
yeah, and if he and you get to make that counterattack when they're breaking resilience often, right? And then occasionally, I mean, he has five
Would you
tacks.
though? Like, would I make the counterattack when they're trying to break resilience other than going for the knockdown? Because otherwise, I want to do it on the turn they tackle, right?
Well, it
Because like if
depends on. it depends on how close they get to you. If they're within 1 inch, then you want to do it when they'll take the tackle. But if they're within if they're in two but outside of one, then you want to take it on the resilience
Oh,
swing
because I
because you
can
can
push it
push them
out.
out of
Yeah, yeah,
melee.
yeah.
Yeah,
Okay, got it. Yeah.
yeah. Um,
That makes sense.
and then if you happen, like, you never rely on the how's at in the middle of his playbook, but if you spike and hit that on the counterattack, your opponent's the saddest person alive. So,
Yeah, no, I mean the play is real good, and I get
yeah.
why it's only ball, right? Like if I could buy that, that spell is
Yeah,
very dumb.
yeah, definitely.
Uh, okay. Moving on to butchers. So because we only have 15 minutes left, I kind of want to save the butchers, unless you have more time than that.
I
Because
can go
like
a bit over. We could do
okay, so
yeah.
let's end on butchers then and go until
Okay.
you feel. So my actual only stop is 9:30. So
Okay.
between now and 9:30, as soon as you want to bail, you are free of my nonsense. But until then, I'm super enjoying this
Okay. Cool.
and getting a ton.
Cool.
So
Sweet.
we've got fillet fillet, depending
Yep.
on who's talking about her.
Yep.
We have good old ox. We
Mm.
have the man himself, the boar. We have the one mascot that counts. And then my understanding of this guild is you want to be. I think it's very captain dependent, and I know that all guilds are quote captain dependent, but I think that
Mhm.
the butchers are very captain dependent in a way that like the union is very captain dependent where like your game plan kind of really changes. I think that
Mhm.
the ox captain strategy is ox doesn't actually want to rumble. He can if he needs to, but ox's goal is to like sit back, create this aura, and make people do a bunch of good, and like kind of in a ragey sort of way, like his influence is spent making other models better
Mhm.
and having their scrum be more deadly because he's around. I think Boar is a one round house of machine guns where like other than his legendary turn, like you point him at some model, that model dies, and then everyone else tries to go in after him. Like he'll take out whatever
Mhm.
the stave of the world is, and then clear the way for everyone else. And also is remarkably efficient. Like the
Mhm.
efficiency he brings is not just the influence that he brings, but also like some people become furious, some people become berserk, et cetera, et cetera.
Mhm.
And then I think that Philip is the uh, kind of between the two. Like she's less I want to murder one person than Boar, and also less I want to have the scrum be beneficial than Ox, but kind of plays like Vet Cat, where you put her in a situation where someone dies and other people around also take damage, and like she can kind of hang, but like she's only 14 boxes, but she's got a 5 defense, but mostly like she wants to kill someone because if you attack her she just dies.
Yeah. I think those are. I think that's a good characterization of all of them. I think broadly the way I think about butchers, and really the way I think about a lot of fighting guilds, but butchers are probably the most extreme version of this, at least the ones that I'm most familiar with, is you choose your captain and you choose your strategy based on the idea that butchers want to hit the opponent so hard that they've become dazed. So what I mean by that is that like you always want to hit the part of them that's going to hit you back the hardest and break that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's the only thing that butchers are good at but they're really good at it. And so to me, the way I try to think about matchups and therefore captain choices for butchers is I try to think about what is the most frustrating or threatening model that the opponent has and figure out which captain will make me the best at killing that model over and over. um, so, for example, alchemists. So we talked about Vetcat, so I think this is a good example. Vetcat is a horrible liability for the Alchemist team as long as Filet is on the pitch, because Filet absolutely shreds Vetcat, and Vetcat's existence makes every friendly Alchemist around Vetcat way more threatened by Filet, because Filet uses him to get the Blood Rain, or wait, yeah, Blood Rain. I always get those two character plays confused. Gets
Mm-hmm.
the Blood Rain off of Catalyst because Catalyst has horrible defense and armor,
Yeah, he's
right?
he's 2-1 and he's enormous.
Yeah, exactly. And so as long like I choose Filet into Alchemist because I want them to hate the fact that they have Vet Catalyst on the field, and like I want to make them regret him being on the pitch. So
Sure. That's
that's
kind of dark, but I love it. Yeah, let's
that's
go.
that's I think how you have to think about playing butchers because they really have no control, at least not any plausible, consistent control, and they really have mediocre ball skills at best. But they hit really hard and they go very far, and so you just want to hit the thing that doesn't want to get hit. But yeah, your characterization of the of the captains is correct. I think that basically you could say that Ox makes all of your attacks very valuable, Boar makes you have more attacks, and Fillet allows you to pack all of your work into one activation if you wanted to. So whichever of those three tools is what's good for your opponent is what you
So,
choose.
so I don't really understand what that take on fillet means.
Oh,
Like,
okay. So
is it because I'm buffing her a bunch, or is it
yeah,
because I'm setting her up? Okay.
that's exactly right. So here, let me just pull up my typical list for fillet. Uh, so my fillet list will pretty much always have this, this, and this. And then the last one could nowadays basically be this guy, or if I was really feeling frisky, this guy. Um, so let's just look at these auto includes that I've already chosen.
So roast, I get it. You're giving the well, it's hot.
Yep,
Cinnamon, you're giving gets that bake,
yep,
and meat hook, you are either tooling up or giving them snared, or both.
yep. And then
Okay.
Boiler can mark target people and also bleed people along with Meat Hook. Ox can pull people in so that they're closer to Fillet and theoretically give the owner if you happen to be snowballing. And then Boar is sort of a different thing. I choose Boar if I really want like a different efficient.
Diversified threat.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
But so let's say that this was our list plus a mascot. If you count mark target as buffing Fillet, which at least on turn
Which
one I
I do.
would,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, for
So
sure. Yeah.
mark target is at least one influence, two, three, four, five, six. So, or sorry, 11. So that's 11 of your 13 influence is going just into Fillet's activation on turn one if you kicked. Like, and really Boiler could throw two more mark targets or throw an axe to bleed somebody. So really it could be your whole set of 13 influence all goes into making Fillet's activation the most unpleasant it could possibly be for your opponent. So that's what I mean when I say that like you funneling all of your work through an activation.
Through her, right.
It's twofold. It's one because she's the payoff for all of that, but it's also because she's the only point of interaction. So like if this was my list and I started here and I like kicked the ball off with Fillet, then my opponent blah 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 has some models over here that they're bouncing around with, and at the end of turn one, my models are probably like this. They moved like about this much up plus wherever the mascot is, and then bottom of turn one, Fillet comes over here and hopefully, if I play this right, does a billion damage and kills somebody and sets someone else to be killed. So
Hmm.
we've activated 12 models, and my opponent hasn't interacted with me at all, and I've interacted with him with exactly one model, but I carried at least 11 influence over there to hit him.
Right. Right. You're leveraging you're putting all of the pressure through that one interaction. So it's like, yeah, it's one point of interaction, but like it's Bernoulli's principle, right? Like it's just
Yeah,
a
yeah,
lot going on in that one activation.
yeah, exactly.
Uh, okay. So then the rest of the roster, who don't I understand? Uh, when am I playing brisket, if
I
ever?
I don't play brisket anymore.
Got it.
um, I think uh, I think you could still play Brisket 1 as sort of like a ball holding thing, but honestly, this actually maybe I'm not going to talk about Brisket too much because of Roast. Roast is, in my opinion, the best model in the guild right now,
Yeah.
and he's
I think it's like you have resilience and you have like get it while it's hot and turn up the heat. I think that it makes sense. Like I get
yeah,
why you would play like I would play two of this character, I
yeah,
think.
totally, totally. I mean, I think that there's like he literally if you give him any influence from 0 to 4, so all the legal possible allocations for roast, I'm you can find something to do with him on almost any given turn. Like he at 0 influence, he can just hold the ball somewhere with resilience and big belly and be a pain in the ass. At 1, he get it while it's hot, your most important models, or even turns up the heat if you're really getting frisky with it, or he just hit someone to knock down, and anything above 1, he's gonna bring a practically automatic knockdown, which is something that the butchers have never had before he existed, and then hit somebody a bunch of times for very consistent damage and pushing, which is also something that butchers don't have. So
Right.
yeah.
Yeah,
So I
he seems like a mental tax. Like you have to remember Big Belly, but
mhm.
like other than that, I think he's just good. Like yeah,
Yeah.
I mean he's literally the worst possible legal defense you can have, right?
Yep.
And I get it, but like he's also like he seems like he should be a lot.
Oh, I think you cut out again. I don't know if
Nah.
there you are. I gotcha. I
Okay.
gotcha.
So yeah, whenever I cut out, for some reason I can still hear you. But
That's
like
weird.
I'm still surprised that he has an 8 sprint. Like
Yep.
it seems like he should be slower than that because of his size and because of how much mobility he brings to the guild.
Mhm.
But whatever.
Yeah. So
Uh
he's a blessing for the guild in terms of competitive strength, but I think he does kind of invalidate the like lower performing quarter of butchers squaddies, and brisket is one of those in my opinion. There's just not really a lot of reason to play brisket, honestly.
okay, so like at that point I think you've answered why I'm also not playing like Tenderizer Shank Lane, right? And I think the closest one to seeing play is Lane in my opinion, and I think that you can play Lane if you think that you need someone who can play the Friday style role of like it's a soccer model but also fights.
Hmm. I actually, well, I think Lane is like playable, but I'm not really a huge fan of him. But I disagree about Shank. I think Shank is not worth playing with Filet, but I think Shank is very worth playing with Boar and wow, I just grabbed both of their squatty versions. Boar and Ox. Uh, Basically for I mean effectively the same reason. It's sort of abstract, but Shank is like the most consistent way to take those two captains' buffs and apply them to a bad guy. So like Ox Ox's 6-inch owner is 9.1 inches long, while Shank or somebody else with 2-inch melee is attacking it and attacking with it. Because this is the
Yeah, yeah,
distance
yeah.
that yeah,
Yeah,
and
you have with the model plus melee range, right? Yeah.
similarly, Shank is really good at using Bloodlust, which is the Berserk buff from Boar, because well, for a
Oh,
couple
because he basically can't not get a damage result.
exactly, he's extremely consistent at hitting damage, and also the fact that all of his damage has dodge means that he's pretty darn good at getting around a lot of defensive stuff too. Where it's like if you get into somebody that's like 2-inch melee and gonna counterattack you for a 1-inch push or dodge, he can just dodge in 1 inch while he's hitting you and keep triggering Berserk and stuff.
Right.
Um, and he even can like something I often find myself doing is if he makes his 6 attacks with Berserk, and on the 6th attack he gets 3 hits, he just where they goes 4 inches back away because he is vulnerable, and that sucks. That's the downside of Shank. But
And you
he's
effectively play it like second wind.
yeah right. You only get you quote unquote only get 5 attacks, but you get a to where they go away. So I think I play Shank in I would say almost every Boar or
So
Ox game, but also
Shank,
oh sorry go
I,
ahead.
I've now played. So I played a Union game where I was playing Rage. So it's kind of doing what Minx does when I'm spending when I'm using the buffs that I put on her with like Bloody Coin and etc. Like
Mhm.
that's the person who I'm spending the influence through and then saving at the end.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. And so, but yeah, I don't play Shank with Filet because Shank wants the same thing, the same buffs that Filet does, but Filet
And can't give
almost,
her any buffs
yeah, but
effectively,
Filet
other than
almost
like
always
thousand
wants them
cuts, but
better. So,
whatever.
yeah, exactly. So, um,
And
yeah,
then Tenderizer, uh, I think that his quote new counter charge kind of makes him not do anything.
yeah, he doesn't do anything.
Uh,
He punishes people that are already losing the game. That's like the best you can say about him, which I don't really care about. Like if,
and back in the day, he also had, I think, the easiest knockdown before you could play up roast.
yeah, exactly. And he would his knockdown being on 2-inch melee might still be valuable, except he's like he has the same charging threat range as Roast because it's 7 versus 8, even though
Eight,
Roast has 1
right,
inch melee. But Roast has
right,
resilience and is a god otherwise, so Tenderizer's still not useful.
great. Uh, Dope.
Yeah.
Uh,
I could wax poetic for hours about how fun butchers are to play, but they're very fun to play. They're very fragile, and they, um, are extremely pleasant to win games with.
So I am excited. I still have not played a Butcher's game. I've played against the Butchers once, but it was the one of the games where I was literally teaching someone. So it's like, yes, I beat a child.
Yeah.
Great, awesome. Um,
I think, I don't
so
know, I mentioned Vedox as someone I take with Filet, but I should probably specifically shout him out because I consider him like almost as good as Roast in this guild. And he, in sort of the same way that Roast brings something in his knockdown that butchers have never had access to before and sort of change their options and how to deal with stuff in the game. Vedox having a purchasable pull is extremely strong. Um, and I think that the mathematics of his rowdy and lash out abilities are sort of underappreciated by the community, or at least have been in the
so
past.
I think when I so as a Magic player before I played Guild Ball and before I sort of like started consuming Guild Ball content, Lash Out reads to me as the nuttiest
Yeah.
because it's diceless and because like if you just look at his size and you look at his melee zone, like that is a decent chunk of the pitch that is just taking damage,
Hmm.
right? Like that seems super strong.
Yeah, and I think he so a lot of times playing any fighting guild, you end up jailing a model over a turn line, leaving them at 1 HP and then killing them at the top of the turn to take activation advantage, right? Um,
Yeah.
and I mean, Vedox is the best at that in the game. Because if you can put an opponent somewhere where they're going to be 3 HP or less and within walking distance of Vedox, Vedox literally does not need influence. He just walks over there, ends his activation, and you
And
not
they
only
die.
kill the model, but you get the owner for the turn.
Oh
So,
wow, I didn't even think about that.
so it's like in sort of the same way that I described Dapper earlier as doing a thing where you set him up perfectly and he starts the turn by killing two models, turning on commanding aura and say fuck you, you can't be here anymore.
Yeah.
Vedox does that for no influence if you play it right. So and you don't always get to do that in every game, but if you do, you can
But when
often
you do,
just win the
right.
game off of it. And
Yeah.
when you don't get that dream with Vedox, his pull ability is so useful as effectively a gap closer for whatever really hitty models you're working with that he's just extremely valuable very often. And he basically is the reason that I would play
Oh wait,
Fillet
wow.
and Vet.
Whirling changes a pulse. It's not targeted.
Yeah,
That's wild.
yeah. Every
That's
every enemy
wild.
within 4 inches gets pulled 4 inches directly towards him, and because it's a push, it functions the same way. So you can pull them exactly as far as you want. It just has to be
Right.
directly towards. So
Right. I can only move the people I want to move into
yeah,
him.
and you can move 1 inch melee models to just within 2 inches of him, so he's engaging
Right.
three of them, and they're not engaging him, etc., etc. Like, there's a lot of nuance to using him, in my opinion, at least for a butcher's model. um, and so he's sort of the reason that my tournament list would be Filet and Vet Boar. I think Ox is like comparably good to those two, maybe slightly worse, but you can't play Ox with
You
Ox,
can't play
so
Ox. Yeah, 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 got it.
so yeah.
Wow, yeah, no, I definitely thought that I knew that the power of Lash Out and the power of Rowdy made sense to me. And I sort of saw him as I get that they like whenever I see someone with a denominator 3 influence, I assume that they're pretty strong. So I read his
Hmm.
playbook and saw I was like, oh, chains, I get it, okay.
Yeah.
And then I saw the old ways, and it was like, oh, whenever that happens, it's win more. And I guess I shouldn't think of it as win more because occasionally it's like just built-in actual power, but it felt win more to me. But the thing that I totally did not evaluate was that whirling change is a straight guarantee. Like
Yep.
it because you're not rolling, it's diceless, right? Like
Yep.
that's huge.
Yeah. So it's you if you want to, and someone's within 11 inches of him, or 13 inches if he has Cinnamon's buff, then you can guarantee that they'll be 4 inches closer to your whole team. If you just sprint some whirling chains and it's his turn, and they take 3 damage. So
As just a icing on the cake bonus.
yeah, which and through the 3 damage might, for example, trigger Shanks's damage target too. So there's like there's a lot of ways in which his sort of like light control slash gap closing abilities have hidden synergies
When
with
it's
other
all the
models.
control you get,
Yeah,
it certainly counts as being more tactical and flexible than you
yeah,
might think at first glance.
exactly.
So uh, Boiler
Mm,
in the fillet list. So Boiler looked to me like a machine gun model. Like he looked like the type of model that you would put a bunch of influence on, and he would go in with the pig. and kill something.
Mm.
Uh, it seems like that's not how you see him.
I think he has. I think he's kind of a. That is definitely one of the things he can do. I think he kind of has. He's kind of a why am I keep thinking jackknife, Swiss Army knife. That's the thing I'm looking for.
Got it.
He so in turn one, I like him because I don't want to interact with a ton of models, but he can mark target people, which is always good, and he can axe throw if given an opportunity, which doesn't always hit, but if it does hit, it does a fuck ton of damage because it applies bleed.
It does
So
six. Yeah.
yeah, it
Yeah.
does
It
6, or
does.
they have to spend momentum on it. Um, and then with anatomical, which is sometimes necessary against some guilds like masons and blacksmiths and stuff. His playbook is sort of deceptively good. It's not nearly as good of a knockdown as roast, but it's still an extremely plausible knockdown against a lot of models in the game. And once he knocks down or someone else knocks down the model, he can just swing for the fences, and he'll often hit the 3 on 4. But even if he doesn't, his 2 on 2 is excellent, and he's
Hmm.
still applying bleed, which has synergy with fillet if you're playing fillet. Um, the push dodge is situationally excellent. I mostly pick that on counterattacks. Sometimes it surprises people that like
That
butchers
he can do
models
that.
can actually
Yeah.
get out of an attack. Um, and then the thing you're describing, using assists with princess, that does not happen in every game. And I think I don't consider that his major selling point anymore because, and this is going back to something I said earlier, which is just that the game has gotten faster in general than it used to be. There are a lot more models in the game who, if presented with a princess that walks into melee with them and a threatening boiler 6 inches away, can like do something about that before boiler gets to walk up and smash them.
Hmm.
But if you manage to catch your opponent into a situation where you are allowed to do that, boiler has like the highest damage in the guild. Like they're given sufficient buffs, he just does a truly
Yeah,
stupid amount of damage.
he wears the owner quite well, which is how I
Yeah, exactly.
so the first time I played against the Butchers was that game against the first timer,
Mm,
and they were playing Catanox, so they just had the owner.
yeah,
And I was looking at oh okay, well I want to make sure like who can go in the owner, and I read Boiler through it, and it's like, oh, actually Boiler in that aura is terrifying. Like
yeah.
I think it's just a lot of damage.
Yeah, and Boiler is also sort of statistically in a good spot. He doesn't have any super standout numbers, but four defense, 1 armor, 14 boxes is fine, and that's about as much as we can expect as butchers. 6-8 movement, I actually think is really good. Having a seven
Yeah,
inch
his
walking,
jog is super high. Yeah.
yeah, having a 7 inch walking threat is awesome with this good of a playbook. And yeah, I don't know. I there's no like other than I guess anatomical for armored models. There's no specific thing that I bring him to solve alone. But I'm never really like disappointed in him. He always does something in a game. So
Yeah, like he seems to be on like I believe he is on the six most of the time. I
yeah,
just was treating him differently in like I had pigeonholed him into the wrong role in that you're telling me that pigeonholing him is wrong. Like
yeah,
just the fact that he can do so much means that you should keep an open mind about how much influence he needs and what he can be told to do.
yeah. I basically think that like in any fight where he can interact with opponents, he's gonna do something pretty well. And you just sort of have to think about what you want him to do on a given turn, and he'll probably do okay. So yeah.
Nope. All right, I'm going to bounce super forward because this is the last one we're going to talk about tonight,
Mhm.
and bounce to the order because this is the one that I have the most experience with. So
Okay.
I would like to either be right or the most wrong. Uh,
Okay.
so let's see,
Yeah,
kill
I'll
all
get
this
rid of
stuff.
this.
Oh, I killed this a ball.
Nah, whatever.
So uh, brisket, pride, Benny. Is there a trick, by the way, to spawn a model or more than one model? Like, can I shift click or does that not work?
I don't know about spawning more than one model, but if you select them and hit Control Copy, but or Control C,
No, no, I
that'll.
meant like pulling them out from the roster. Like, is the only way
Oh,
to do
oh
that
no,
is
I
going
don't
to
know
file thing?
that. I
Okay.
actually, for someone who's played a lot of Vassal games now, I don't know a lot of the more niche stuff. I sort of get by on just copy paste and the kindness of strangers.
Yeah, dude. So like, I've learned that anytime I'm about to move a model, like the best way to do it is just copy, move, etc., and then
Yeah.
like validate the move, kill it. Yeah. I've got the basics down. It's just whenever I spawn tokens or models, I always feel like, I'm pointing, click, typing an email.
Mm.
So all right. Uh, I think Brisket is like the most absurd non-shark striker in the game. Like I think she is bananas mobile. Uh, especially because after she dies, you can legendary her back into relevance, and she can legendary to score in ways that are super nonlinear and not foreseen.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that it's like somewhat worthwhile to legendary to save a model, but most of the time you should save it to score 4 points.
Mm.
Uh, I think her playbook is a little sad in that her momentous tackle dodge is not on one, but everything she has except with aplomb is money in the bank. I'm open means that I don't lose the ball on an already activated model. It also extends her range pretty bonkers. Route one is super strong in that it effectively gives me another activation worth of movement in a like pseudo superior strategy kind of way. Like a free jog is just super strong.
It's pretty
Uh,
restricted, but yes, it is good. Yeah.
yeah, and then unpredictable and scores for fun are both nuts. Unpredictable often doesn't trigger because people just assume that she's going to score, at least that I've seen, and don't interact with her if they can't also get through the unpredictable. And
Mm.
scores for fun is where she is excellent because everything's a tap in, and if you are getting a tap in, it's almost a guarantee.
Mm.
Uh, you have to play her, so whatever. Pride, I leave, turn on El Aura, put him here, do nothing.
Mm.
Uh, I see the value in Feral Instincts, but I've never activated it because I haven't played against high armor guilds.
Mm.
And I think that Predatory Gaze is actually more powerful than Rushkeeper. It's just that Rushkeeper makes people play stupid or play suboptimally.
Yeah.
But Predatory Gaze means that I actively make your goal that was going to happen not happen, or I make it easier for me to make that goal not happen. So either Pride is activating very early in the turn or very late in the turn. I don't ever see him activate in the middle.
Mm.
Uh, my auto takes are Season Spigot and Harry the Hat. I think that Season Spigot is like the most flexible. He like is an excellent fighter with floored, and
Mm.
his book has all the tools that a fighter would want. He's also has an almost infinite threat range, like in terms of his
Yeah.
goal threat.
That's pretty
Uh,
ridiculous. Yeah.
he also has balls gone to retrieve the ball. And then having two armor is the highest armor in the guild, which means that you can put him on models that have most of their results at the top, like navigators or whatever, and he reliably turns that off unless they buff them. And then I kind of fall apart. Like I've played all the models, and
Mm.
I recognize that Mist is powerful, but I kind of always just have better strikers than Mist, so I don't know what Mist is doing here.
Mm.
When I play Benediction, he seems like a total stud until he does nothing. Uh, Grace, I think her legendary is super interesting, and I think that her healing promises to be better than it actually is.
Mm.
Um, but Quickfoot turns out to be the best thing that she does, and I think that the model I play the most, other than the three that I always play, is Fangtooth because he seems like a stud. Like I
Mm.
think that he like Flagellin is completely insane. Resilience is super strong for killing the ball and counterattacking, and like just buying ground pound is a thing that is very good.
Mm-hmm. I have a local who we used to play with a lot. Who his favorite thing in the whole game was buying ground pound. He would just run in there and buy ground pound over and over again. Anyway,
He has three. I'm going first. Let's go.
yeah, um, yeah, I pretty much agree with that. I think so. I have played against Order some. I have not played a ton of Order myself, but I guess yeah, to me, Benediction would be someone I would probably only take receiving in Order. I do think a lot about Benediction is really good, but a lot of what I like about him is more relevant to Union because they're like a stronger fighting guild.
Mhm.
Um, I do think,
Well, and the thing is, the Union gets to take advantage of things like Playmaker because it
mm,
matters, right? Like
yeah,
making the extra pass, and it like I already have Harry. I have Harry Aura, uh, reading the game, and I'm open, and it's like okay, cool. Now I also have Playmaker. Okay,
yeah,
whatever. But like, Union also has like which rage can only get one influence. Isn't there one that can only do that, or am I
yeah,
forgetting?
the Rage one, yeah,
So yeah, like
yeah, exactly.
if giving him a free pass is bananas, like he normally
Mm,
can't do that, and he still has his berserk nonsense. So
that's definitely true. I guess the only thing that I would say is that based on your assessment, to me, I would value Grace very highly. looking at this guild because I think Quickfoot is like you said that Quickfoot is the best thing that she does. I agree with that, and I would like to like underline that, I guess, in your notes because to
Okay.
me, Quickfoot is one of the best, most easy to implement abilities in the game, and Grace can do it for free once and can do it again, even two more times on turn one if you really want to for some reason. And I think that that's very valuable. There's also, to me, her legendary is sort of important to have available to click because there has been, I think the more you play Order and the better your opponents get, the more often they will try to interfere with the ball of light in some way.
Oh yeah,
And
most of the time I lose the ball of light halfway through the game, and I don't get it back in the games where I'm not playing Grace.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
it's gone, and if I'm spending time getting the ball, I'm going to get the one that can score points.
right,
Uh,
exactly.
and often the one that dies is the ball. But like Order seems like they spike on turn one super hard, and then the rest of the game you're trying to win off of that momentum. And as soon as the game turns around, it's like, well, all of my tricks are gone. Like I'm out of Harry Aura. You have my stupid God Ball,
Mm.
and my captain used her legendary, so now I'm kind of just shitty fish.
Yeah, okay, well, I think you're on the right track then because that's basically how I would describe their game plan as well. Is they're kind of like a shock and awe scoring team, and they sort of in the first turn and a half they want to have a kind of insurmountable advantage, or they're probably losing. Um, and to me, that makes Grease very valuable because I think just putting Quickfoot on Brisket or even Mist or Spigot, someone else who's trying to score for whatever reason, um, will often dramatically change the types of things that your opponent either has to do or can do to keep you from scoring multiple times, even. Um, but otherwise, I think your instincts are correct. I think, yeah, I don't like Pride very much. Like, I mean, Rushkeeper is better than not having it for sure, but I do wish they had a better mascot personally.
Like so the weird part is I think in terms of like raw power in a mascot, like I
Mm,
think Pride is like top tier. Like I can't even name maybe I can name another mascot that's just as powerful. Like he's almost a squatty in terms
mm.
of his power, right? It's just that he doesn't do anything in this guild.
Yeah, exactly.
Specifically,
He doesn't.
like he does a thing that I kind of don't want him to do, which is
Right.
like prevent you from scoring because I want the ball back, right? Like
Yeah.
it's weird.
Yeah, and he's very good at defending a part of the pitch that you're not going to spend a lot of time on. So, um, because you're going to be sprinting frantically after the ball and at your
Yeah,
opponent.
we're all just running like a children's soccer game. It's like the ball's over there, flood it, right? Like
Yeah. Um, and
where am
yeah,
I
I think.
playing Mist? I think is the main question that I've got. Like I don't because the roster seems like I want to play everyone. Like I see
Mm,
reasons to want to include all of these people, and other guilds have problems where it's like I don't know what I fill this last slot with. I guess I take this guy, right?
yeah.
But like in this matchup or in this guild, I feel like I want to be playing these six and the lion, right?
Mm.
And I don't know when Mist finds a way into the list.
I
Other than
do.
I guess I don't play Benediction. Like I think it's these five that I have a hard time not playing.
Mm. I think I would play Mist if I was kicking against some guilds. Basically, I'm trying to think about how I would describe this because I think sometimes you have a specific idea where you know that the first model that you score with is going to die. Basically, there's no way for you to stop that.
Hmm.
And you have a really great idea for how you want your second goal to go, and that second goal is going to be scored with Brisket, which means your first goal probably shouldn't be Brisket because if you're if
If
Brisket
Brisket's
dies,
the one who's going to die, right? That's sad, right?
then
Like
it's
other than the
sad,
fact that she can,
and Brisket doesn't really have a lot of ways to save herself once she's committed to a goal. So a lot of times teams that can win momentum on turn one will jail her and kill her on turn two if you scored with Brisket. And if you're really counting on Brisket existing on turn two, then I would kick with Mist. And I'm trying to think of specific examples of teams that I would do this into is the thing. Actually, okay, yeah, I think farmers and shepherds are a good example of one. Um, because I think you can if you can choose to kick and try to kick with Mist and with Grace on your team and try to get Mist kicking from a location that has cover or that's near cover, so she can like, or they, I can't remember.
It's
Yeah,
he now, I think.
no, it's
Because
unknown now. Yeah, or no, it is
oh, I
he.
thought
Oh no,
it's
you're right,
yeah,
it's he. Yeah,
it's because Mist is trans.
right, right. And anyway, use Spigot's Heroic or use Potbellied Pass or some such thing to get Mist extremely far up the field with Quick Foot and the Cover of Darkness thing, and basically just be like, Mist, you're doing this because Brisket doesn't want to die. Good night, sweet prince. Never gonna see you
Hmm.
again. Right? Like,
Right.
I
Yeah.
think that
Well
there's,
done. Okay.
yeah, I think that there's like an argument for that, but I don't. I think it would have something to do with the pitch. It would have a lot to do with the matchup, and I'm not really sure I can come up with like a really specific
Okay,
example.
well, I think that means that my analysis is correct. Like the
Yeah.
so it is matchup and terrain dependent, and so
Mhm.
it like the in what in what abstract space am I playing Mist? Okay, there really isn't one, but in these situations you would,
Yeah.
and in that and the part of the puzzle that I didn't have is the uh what does your second goal look like? And in the world where the model is going to die that scores the first goal, it ought not to be Brisket, right?
Yeah.
Because a lot of the time I actually assumed that it was Brisket because Brisket had the easy like it seems like she can get through stalemates the easiest because of passing in like pass I'm open or Harry or a dodge pass I'm open etc. Then route one like she can get there from
Mhm.
basically anywhere and I assume that she's just going to die and then I use her legendary to get her back into action.
Yeah.
But in a world where like I should just spend a different model instead of Brisket to score the first goal, that makes sense to me.
Okay.
Also,
I you saying all this, I think I have a better way of describing it now. You're 100% right in your reading of this, but this is what I think it is. It's something like farmers because farmers are going to make your second goal much harder to get than your first goal. But in their first turn, farmers want to be like setting up and putting down harvest markers and not really interacting with you except for like Thresher or something like that. The reason the fact that their turn one is going to be pretty passive makes this all easier for Mist because there won't be a lot of pressure on Mist. And so you're 100% right. Brisket is better at scoring than Mist by like a long shot. There's no question about that.
mhm,
But what what I'm picturing in my head is that against something like Farmers, you want to make your first goal harder because farmers are going to be working to make your
because
second
they're
goal.
dirtling. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and they're
Like
going to make their
it's like
second goal
during the
incredibly difficult.
downtime. So if I have n difficulty to spread across my goals, I shouldn't pop off and make the first goal the easiest because I should save that for when they're going to. So like in the
Yeah,
mirror, I would want to brisket it because like
yeah,
the game is going to get easier as time goes on. But in a like the farmers are kind of the definitive guild of setup and to do something else. Like
right.
or I guess like brewers are like that
Yeah,
too
Brewers is
because
another
they're
example too, especially for Corker, because Corker really isn't going to try too hard to stop your first goal because he's got his
right.
own shit to take care of. So,
Right. I've got plans. My
yeah,
plans are some beer tokens and some buffs and some movement. Got it.
and Corker's like okay theoretically with playing 4 points down if he gets his setup right. So you take your worst striker into that first goal because you really want to be prepared for the mid game. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay. That absolutely makes sense. While they are literally sowing the seeds for the future, I work for it.
yeah,
And then when they're actually playing against me, I get to meme out with brisket and bounce around the pitch.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
Well, this was totally excellent and a lot of fun.
Cool,
And if you got a few more of these in you, I would absolutely love that.
totally, man.
And
Yeah, this was fun for me too. This is fun to walk through.
kick ass. And then yeah, as soon as you either post this or save this, I'd like to clip out at least the Brewers part and send it to my Brewers buddy, and then uh, give him some insight on that too. I could also
Totally.
download some of it to him, but I think hearing it from like the primary source, so to speak, is valuable.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. And if you have any specific questions before the next time we do this, and you just want to message me, feel free. Obviously, it's not like I have office hours or whatever. So.
For sure, for sure, for sure. But yeah, this is like exactly the level of stuff that I was interested in. Both because like I feel like just chatting about games is a thing that I love to do basically more than anything.
Word.
And secondly, like this is the level of stuff that I feel like I am equipped to understand, but would have taken me a large number of games to come to the conclusion on my own, if ever.
Yeah.
So just I feel like I'm getting a huge leap, and I really appreciate it. And then I'll hit you about scheduling the next one too.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, man. This was lots of fun.
For sure. Good night, man. Thank you very much.
Good night. All right, I'm gonna turn off the stream in a second. But yeah, we probably before you guys all got here, we talked about I wasn't gonna focus on this. It was just gonna be about his questions and stuff, so I wasn't gonna pay attention to the chat. But I see that we got some folks in here, so I hope you all enjoyed that too. And yeah, I miss Guild Ball. I hope I get to play it in real life again soon. And yeah, good night everybody. Well, I'll be doing more of these. I said to Andrew that we probably do like 3-ish of these, but honestly, I'll probably do at least as many as it takes to get through all the guilds. I don't know how long that will be. Ugh, man, I'm gonna have to try to explain to him what rat catchers do. I have no idea what rat catchers do. Um, oh my god, even Vince was in here. Hey Vince, you ever heard of this game? You should play it sometime. Okay, I am going. Goodbye, everybody.